one of the presenters, one of the executives talking about, was less about how many people they're going to have. It's more about the types of skills they have. And I think it's, it doesn't have to be a pinpoint exact number, but It's about really what those people, how do they connect with the rest of the organization, the portfolio and partner ecosystem and so forth. So I think that's a critical distinction, because often, we hear from others that they tout X amount of people that they have in certain organizations. And while scale matters, I think capability is sometimes trump scale.
Welcome to TBR Talks, decoding strategies and ecosystems of the globe's top tech firms, where we talk business model disruption in the broad technology ecosystem. From management consultancies to systems integrators, hyperscalers to independent software vendors, telecom operators to network and infrastructure vendors, and chip manufacturers to value-added resellers. We'll be answering some of the key intelligence questions we've heard from executives and business unit leaders among the leading professional services, IT, and telecom vendors. I'm Patrick Heffernan, Principal Analyst, and today we'll be talking about Fujitsu's event last month with Boz Hristov, Principal Analyst for TBR's Digital Transformation Practice. Boz, we both enjoyed that event immensely out in Santa Clara, California, 1st of October. Hopefully our write-up is published by the time this podcast drops, but share something you learned about Fujitsu at that event that you did not know before we went there. And I will remind everyone listening and myself, we were just with Fujitsu in March of this year. So this was a great opportunity to get back out to Santa Clara with them, hear their new refined message, hear what was happening, particularly for Fujitsu Americas. But saying all that, what jumped out at you?
Yeah, it was a great event. I think it was a good way to frame the strategy that's evolving and get a little click down and three sometimes in some of the key areas for growth. Think about Fujitsu UVANS, understanding what does that mean, how it impacts the company's portfolio and go-to-market messaging, on the evolution of the business model, the work around they do around AI and Gen AI, kind of what's their thinking from both technology and business perspective, partners, how they think and work with partners. So definitely some really key elements of the go-to-market efforts. But if I had to kind of put a pin down on what really stood out for me, was really a company that is not afraid of change. I think it's they do understand it takes time. Any strategy execution takes time, but kind of took away that it's they seems like to have the right ingredients, the right mindset. Even though it may appear that they're slowly making those changes, they are in motion. I think the strategy that we heard from the Americas CEO was very a good example of exactly those changes that I think starting to be permeate across other geographies as well. But I think it's a really good use case of how Fujitsu, in spite the associated with traditionally hardware company, an infrastructure company, they actually are making that pivot towards becoming services-led company and really be, as they describe it, SaaS-like business model. I think it's embracing that mindset. I think it's sometimes much harder to make the change internally and to get the broad-based buy-in from the executive leadership, from Japan through Europe to, here in the North America business, than actually convincing the clients. Obviously, clients and partners need to understand that, the messaging and the portfolio, but I think the internal transformation sometimes it's more challenging, as I said, and I think that, a good example is the change of the Americas business. I mean, the divesting of the data center business and being really services oriented and focus on building their consulting practice. And again, a lot of good ideas. Obviously now it's time for execution, but I think it's definitely the fact that they are recognizing it and they're starting to make those first steps. I mean, it's a crawl, walk, run, So they're definitely in that between first and second phase of the strategy. So it was a good way to think about Fujitsu through a different lens.
Yeah, I think they had a really, if this makes any sense, a really sober vision. Like they were realistic about where they could go, where they want to go. And they had that vision of where they want to go, but it never felt like it was a marketing spin around, let's just take the challenge that we've had and try and turn them into opportunities or anything like that. It was very sober, very realistic. At the same time, they had a vision of where they want to go. Two things you mentioned I want to hear more about because I have my own views on it, but I want to hear you first. Going in, I would not have been able to clearly articulate what Uvance is and will be. I got more out of it, more out of this event around Uvance than I had ever before. Also going in, if you had told me that they were evolving towards a SaaS-like business model, I would have said, I don't know what that is. That means. Are you SaaS? Are you not? What's the like part? On the second question, on the SaaS-like, is it a matter of the market needs to catch up to the ideas that Fujitsu has about how they want to evolve, or they just need a different term for what exactly they're trying to do? Take that first, then come to
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, taking that first, because I think that's kind of like that leads to what Uvance actually, the way I think about Uvance, and the way I understood Uvance is. The SaaS-like to me is one way of saying we are going to continue to use our services the way we typically do. We're going to have people, we're going to have consultants, we're going to have execution, delivery people, global delivery network, we're going to have application services, and we're going to use platforms or platforms as a service enabled solutions, either proprietary or partner enabled, that will be delivering services on top of those, like a platform enabled services. The like component is where I can think of, if a client wants to procure a particular component of that platform, either the one that they develop themselves or other partner module, that's the subscription part of it, or the consumption part of it. So I think it's the one way of saying instead of we're going to platform-based services, platform-enabled services, the SaaS-like kind of creates that bridge into how they think about their business moving forward, which I think, it's certainly there's some success stories from others in the market that, the one of the prerequisites usually is to maintain a asset-light business model. What I mean by that is like the data centers was a good example of like the investing here in the US, in the Americas business, because often clients, have their own infrastructure, or they work with, they prefer to go to a public cloud or a private cloud provider. So kind of untying themselves to their own infrastructure enables, and it's a prerequisite, like I said, to drive those SaaS-like conversations, SaaS-like services, because they can do on behalf and execute on behalf of many partners that they do have. And they do have some strong relationships with some key technology partners, and they're evolving with others along the way. And I think that's kind of, as we're thinking about the transformation from, being, more on the hardware side and more on the infrastructure side when it comes to the SI component, the systems integration. They also have had a lot of, and they still do some data centers, outside Americas. The Uvance is kind of like framework around exactly that. How are they positioning their business, the business of the future for Fujitsu, essentially? They share some numbers of the progress with us, which sounds very promising for where the Uvance is today, the business they generate as a result of the Uvance framework. Certainly, there's an opportunity for educating the market around Uvance and what exactly it is, especially coming from Fujitsu, because you have one brand versus, the expansion of it. So, but I think the SaaS-like, bridge can help with that, essentially.
Yeah, so asset light and SaaS-like, and Uvance is just a way of describing what exactly they're going to do. Yeah. Anything else that kind of surprised you? I know they talked a lot about building a consulting capability.
Yeah.
Was that, you know consultants as well as I do. What did you think of that?
It is certainly the right thinking to have the industry consultants, to have the lateral hires, to have the potentially acquisitions, with specific skill sets. So consulting, you need the permission. So as we talked always about it, so if you don't have the permission, it'd be very hard to execute on the SaaS-like strategy we just talked a moment ago. So it's hard. We know it's hard, but it's certainly, I think, one of the presenters, one of the executives talking about was less about how many people they're going to have. It's more about the types of skills they have. And I think it's, it doesn't have to be a pinpoint exact number, but it's about really what those people, how do they connect with the rest of the organization, to the portfolio and partner ecosystem and so forth. So I think that's a critical distinction, because often, we hear from others that they tout X amount of people that they have in certain organizations. And while scale matters, I think capabilities sometimes trump scale, because the depth that you may extract with existing clients and the relationship, I think can be more powerful to build those use cases, especially if they go into new areas like AI and Gen AI and stuff like that. So Is it surprising? Again, I think if I fall back on my earlier comment about that they're not afraid of change, I think that's a perfect example of not being afraid of change.
Yeah, and we've seen so many consultancies build their managed services practices, their implementation practices go sort of, as they traditionally say, further down the stack with the expectation that if you do the consulting work, you can set yourself up for the rest of the work. Fujitsu is coming at it a way that we're seeing lots of others now do, which is from we're doing that traditional migration, that modernization work. We're providing that technology layer now, and we're in the position to build the consulting on top of the services because we see where the problems are. We see what's coming down the pike for these enterprises. And in part of helping them make those changes, we need a consulting practice to go with it. So it makes sense. And it makes sense to do that in a way that isn't, there's not an over expectation of what the growth and the opportunity is. There's to me, there seemed to be a very realistic expectation of where they could compete, who they could compete with, what they could deliver that would be valuable to their clients. And I'm going to go off on a soapbox for a moment here, because that's one thing that really struck me about the event was, yes, they have a branding or a marketing challenge ahead of them, particularly in the US or in the Americas. I get that. Yes, they're undergoing change, significant change in their portfolio and the way that they want to position themselves in the market. Fully understand that. Those two things are completely separate from what clients think when Fujitsu shows up and delivers and continues to deliver. And so from the internal inside baseball view from within Fujitsu and from the analyst view of this company and looking at it and seeing what are the different machinations, what are the different organizational shifts that are going on, the strategy, blah, blah, blah. Fascinating, but actually maybe not significant at all to their clients. And provided they continue to keep the quality of the work that they deliver, the timeliness, the innovativeness, the scalability, all that in place, then that's going to matter a lot more than how they structure the deck chairs on, not on the Titanic, of course not. How they structure themselves internally. I realized where I was going with that in the wrong, a little bit too late. Yeah, that to me was something else I took away from it. Big challenges ahead of them, but those challenges are internal. They got to keep delivering quality services and they'll be in good shape.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else that you took away from the event?
I think one more piece that I'm thinking about is their alliance partner strategy. You know, we've been discussing about what we see in the market from an ecosystem intelligence, the various reports we publish and conversations we've had in the last 18, 24 months, and how much more partners are looking for each other, basically, on both sides of the equation, technology and services, and the evolution of those two-dimensional relationships becoming 3- and 4-dimensional. So I think what we heard from Fujitsu was really strong, well-grounded message around how they think about their partners, outlining the strategy that we often recommend, you know, in terms of like the best practice. So I think that I think it's a really, you know, having the vision from between executives, joint resource investments with some of the strategic partners, the knowledge management, you know, having, you know, partners speak on behalf of Fujitsu as strong as, you know, as Fujitsu would. I think those are key elements that, you know, it's a good use case, I think, actually during one of the presentations around the work they do with ServiceNow. And, you know, Fujitsu uses ServiceNow, you know, internally. So we talk about customer zero use case, right? But they took it to another level. They kind of dialed it up a little bit. And basically the HR practitioners that use ServiceNow internally, they actually were in front of the clients. So the actual practitioners, not the consultants that know about ServiceNow, actually the practitioners were brought into discussions with clients. So that's different. And that's something that I think, you know, could help them to elevate that customer zero to another level.
Yeah, and then within the thing that struck me about that, not only the elevating customer zero, not only having practitioner talk to practitioner, right, and getting sort of the consultants and the salespeople out of the room, but then also the alliances lead mentioned that she thought that the HR practitioners, the Fujitsu badged HR employees, enjoyed the opportunity to get in front of clients. So there's like that talent retention thing on top of it. And as we've talked about before, you know, pity the HR people for the last 5 years with the pandemic, the silent quitting, all the stuff that's been the layoffs in the tech space. So with everything that's been going on, to tell an HR person, hey, we're going to take you out of the office, give you a chance to get in front of another fellow HR person, but on behalf of the company. I think it's just fantastic. So excellent. Who knows? We might be going to see Fujitsu in 6 months again. We seem to be on that kind of pace. And if we do, we'll get back here and chat about it again. Thank you, Boz.
Thank you.
Next week, I'll be speaking with TBR Principal Analyst Angela Lambert and Senior Analyst Ben Carbonneau about our recent travel to Lenovo Tech World 2024. Don't forget to send us your key intelligence questions on business strategy, ecosystems, and management consulting through the form in the show notes below. Visit tbri.com to learn how we help tech companies large and small answer these questions with the research, data, and analysis my guests bring to this conversation every week. Once again, I'm your host, Patrick Heffernan, Principal Analyst at TBR. Thanks for joining us, and see you next week.